Alright, let's settle something right now. Caucasian is not the same as white.
What?
But I'm not explaining why just yet. Watch until the end of the video to get the full story. Welcome to Refugee from Russia podcast. If you're new, I'm so happy to have you here. On this channel, I interview people from Russia, occasionally from ex-USSR countries. I also have a series called Sunday in Russia, where I talk about ordinary Russians or people from Russia. I hold lectures in international universities as well on the topic of Muslims in Russia. Today we're breaking the story, Caucasians in the Middle East, into 7 chapters, covering the history, the struggle, and the survival of the Caucasians in the Middle East. And we will do so with an example of a subgroup of Caucasians called Circassians. And as a bonus, we will explain once and for all why Caucasian is not the same as white. Grab a drink, grab a snack, get super comfortable, and let's dive in. Oh, also, before I forget, hit the like button, comment, and share the video if you think it's worth sharing. Alright, now let's dive in. The term Circassian describes the indigenous peoples of the North Caucasus. The Circassians, or Adyghe people, were one of the largest and most distinct ethnic groups in the Caucasus. Historically, they had a strong warrior culture and developed early forms of nationhood, despite being divided into 12 tribes. Paul Hens, a historian and political analyst, says about this. After the Georgians and the Armenians, the Circassians came closest of all the Caucasian peoples to developing the prerequisites for nationhood. End quote. They are, by religion, Muslims, and many have converted to Islam due to the Ottoman influence in the 16th to 18th centuries. But how did they end up in Russia? Spoiler alert, they did not go willingly. Russia invaded and colonized Circassia in the 19th century, and what followed was one of the bloodiest resistance wars in history. Imagine resisting an empire for a full century and still losing everything. For literally 100 years, the Circassians fought against the Russian Empire from the 1763 to the 1864, one of the longest anti-colonial wars in history. But despite their relentless efforts, they faced a far superior military force. Russian expansion into the Caucasus was brutal. Scorched earth tactics, mass killings, and forced displacement became the standard strategy. Entire villages were burned to the ground, and the Circassians were eventually outnumbered and outgunned. By May 21st, 1864, the war officially ended, and the Circassians were completely defeated. But their suffering was far from over. Walter Richmond, a historian who specialized in Russian and Circassian studies, said the Circassians suffered heavy losses with estimates of up to 800,000 deaths. After their defeat, the Circassians were left with 2 choices: assimilate under Russian rule or leave their ancestral lands forever. The Russian Empire forcibly expelled 90 to 95% of the Circassian population, just think about this, pushing them toward the Ottoman Empire. But their resettlement wasn't random, it was strategic. The Ottomans placed Circassians in Syria, Jordan, Iraq, Lebanon, and Palestine, assigning them roles that aligned with the warrior reputation. They became border guards, agricultural settlers, and military auxiliaries. Many of them found themselves in lands that needed skilled farmers and defenders. Their migration wasn't just about survival, it was about preserving their faith, their identity, and their traditions. Many resisted complete assimilation, wanting to hold on to their unique language, customs, and history. Circassians in Syria, for example, built over 16 villages and established themselves as a powerful community in Quneitra, says Setene Shami, anthropologist who specializes in Middle Eastern diaspora studies. Imagine losing your home again, this time to an entirely different war. In 1967, Israel invaded the Golan Heights, and with that invasion, history repeated itself for the Circassians. Villages that had been built from scratch after the Russian exile were completely destroyed. Thousands of Circassians were displaced again, forced to flee to Damascus, Jordan, and even the US. Many resettled in Paterson, New Jersey, which became a hub for Circassian immigrants in America. Today, only 2 Circassian villages remain in the Golan Heights, Bir Ajam and Breika. The 2011 Syrian civil war led to another wave of Circassian displacement. Some fled to Jordan, Turkey, and Europe, while others sought refuge in Russia's Circassian republics. However, only 3,000 Syrian Circassians were granted asylum in the Caucasus. Many who returned found reintegration difficult, as decades of separation had created cultural and linguistic barriers. Some Syrian Circassians attempted to return to their ancestral lands in the Caucasus, but legal barriers and cultural differences made full reintegration difficult. Despite centuries of displacement, Circassians have managed to preserve their identity through language, traditions, and community networks. Their culture remains alive through music and dance, for example, the Adigi Kaffe, dance that is both a form of storytelling and a way to honor their ancestors. There is also Uerk Kaffe, which is a royal dance that is also beautiful. I will show you guys both of those dances on the screen so that you can enjoy the beautiful Circassian culture in this video. Okay, now let's go back. I also want to mention a few other things about the Circassian culture. For example, the clothing. The Cherkeska, a traditional warrior's coat with symbolic bullet loops, still worn with pride. As far as food, there are a lot of traditional dishes. For example, the Adigi cheese is one of the most famous products, soft and smoked, with a delicate flavor. Khalush, fried pastries filled with cheese, potatoes, or meat. There is also mamrish, a porridge made from cornmeal, similar to mamaliga, often served with meat or cheese. In addition to culture and music and food, social media has helped tremendously to preserve Circassian identity. It's become a tool for Circassians to document their history, their homes, and their heritage, even as they become further displaced. Alright, let's settle this once and for all. Why Caucasian is not the same as white? If you ever filled out a form and checked the box for Caucasian thinking it just meant white, well, congratulations, you may have just unintentionally identified yourself as a Circassian warrior. So, you might be asking, where then this term came from? Did some ancient Caucasian king declare, all light-skinned people shall be called after my glorious mountains? Well, no. It was actually a German scientist named Jonah Blumenbach who, in the 18th century, stumbled upon a skull from the Caucasus region and thought, wow, this is the most symmetrical, beautiful skull I've ever seen. And just like that, he decided that all Europeans, Middle Easterns, and even North Africans should fall under the umbrella term Caucasian. No consultation, no voting, just one guy and one skull. But here's the catch. The actual Caucasians, the Circassians, the Chechens, the Ingush, the people that you know from the MMA world or UFC world, the people from Dagestan, had nothing to do with this label. Imagine being labeled the face of an entire race because some dude in the 1700s liked the shape of a skull. That's wild, right? And it's especially wild because Caucasians in Russia itself are not considered white. They are considered inferior to the Russians who are considered white. Now, let's talk about the cultural and social experiences of people from the actual Caucasus versus those labeled Caucasian around the world. Caucasus peoples, they have a history of displacement, warrior traditions, and deeply rooted customs that have survived centuries of war, genocide, and exile. I even showed you videos of an example of a traditional Caucasian dance. It has nothing to do with what you think of when you hear Caucasian dance. It is not two-step like it is in America. Also, Caucasus peoples, or Caucasian people, they have unique languages, distinct cuisines, and a strict honor code that still influences their daily lives. For example, I am Caucasian. I am from the North Caucasus. And even though I speak Russian as my second language, I have also my native language that I speak with my family, with my loved ones. And that language has nothing to do with the Russian language whatsoever. It also has nothing to do with the Turkish language. It is a language in its own right. It is a part of the Caucasian languages. On the contrary, the Caucasians that people think of today, the white people, the Italian, the Americans, the Irish, they have a very, very different experience and history, unlike the original Caucasians like myself. A broad, vague term applied to people with European ancestry, lumping together vastly different backgrounds under one label, despite having no connection to the Caucasus region. It is just wrong to use this term to describe Italians, Irish, or anybody who is just white. Because one group, the actual Caucasians, had to fight off imperial invasions for centuries. Like I mentioned, Circassians have fought 100 years war. And also, the genocide that was carried out against them by the Russian Empire is the time when the term ethnic cleansing originated. Because at that time, Russian generals used to use the word zachistka, which is the Russian word for cleansing. That's where the term ethnic cleansing actually came from. And on top of that, the genocide that happened with the Circassian people is arguably the first genocide in the history, in the modern history. So I do hope now when you see the Caucasian checkbox on the paperwork at the DMV, you see the difference. So should we stop using the word altogether? The word Caucasian. Honestly, I don't know who is supposed to start this academic shift, but maybe we should start somewhere. Maybe, just maybe, the next time you hear someone misuse Caucasian, you hit them with this little history lesson. And also remember, Caucasian, it's not about race. In its original meaning, Caucasian is the indigenous people of the Caucasus Mountains, or the Caucasia. It's about the history, it's about the culture, it's about the music of these people, and it's about everything that they represent. That is very different, again, from Americans, from Italians, from Irish. In addition, I want to say before I close, why be greedy? Why have two terms to describe your whiteness? You have one, just say white. Keep Caucasian to the original people of the Caucasus. Just a thought. Let me know what you think. Was there anything new that you learned today? Are you Caucasian from the Middle East? How did your family end up there? Please do let me know because I am really curious to learn more about your culture, and maybe in the next video I can explore the topic of Chechens being displaced, because they are another group of Caucasians that have experienced a lot of injustice and were displaced throughout history. Bye.